one of the questions that I've been asked is, CSR or PR, corporate social responsibility or public relations, and actually looking at cause-related marketing. I think it's about a license to operate. It's about positioning yourself in the market and looking like a responsible institution. I think where I'm more interested in terms of companies and media is around their supply chains. I mean, they have incredible reach. You can buy a bottle of Coca-Cola from Ladakh down to Trivandrum. Now, if I can use those supply chains for public health messaging, and I've certainly done this, for example, with Cadbury's years ago, ran a polio campaign, a polio eradication campaign, and they linked in to the polio eradication campaign in India. And all they did was every single one of their calendars, it's got white babies and pretty kittens on, etc., but they're at every single punwalla and every small shop has them, they're giving out free. And they blocked in the date for the National Polio Immunisation Date. They have a reach that organisations like the World Health Organization can only gasp at. I mean, they have better logistics, they have a huge interface with the public. So getting banks, for example, like Standard Chartered, to put HIV/AIDS safe sex messaging on all their ATMs and all their slips and all their pay slips, that's when I find companies in private sector can really make a difference, because they're rolling out and you're getting an access that organisations like mine could never possibly, and most governments in fact can't reach. So I think I'm more impressed, or I'm more keen on that sort of approach, using the private sector in terms of its dissemination, rather than simply linking it in with cause-related marketing. And I don't think that translates really into the public. I once did a crude but very interesting test where I put a small black dress in Selfridges, and it was an identical dress, and I labelled one as fair trade, child labour free, and one was a designer label. And I asked people before I went into store what would they pay different, and they said around about 30% more they'd be willing to pay if they knew that an item hadn't been sourced unethically and hadn't involved child labour. The reality, of course, was they were about to pay 3p, this is in England, was what their cut-off point was. People will buy on design, on quality and cost. The ethics of it are come far less. So what people say they will do and what they do in reality is very different. Most people would feel uncomfortable to say, no, we would buy that because we like it and we don't care that it's taken 100 hours of child labour to sell on a whole load of Zardari or sequin work. They wouldn't confess that, but the reality is what their purchasing power, that is what they do. So I think it's around less about educating the country and looking at social labelling, which again I have issues with, because how do you audit this? It's like the rug mark for carpets. If you can fake a Benetton label or an Armani label, you can fake a rug mark label. It's very, very easy for the informal economy to do this. So auditing this and giving people a sense of comfort that they're making a choice and buying something which is child labour free is somewhat ridiculous. I'm sorry, I'm quite cynical about that. So I think I'm much more interested in getting companies to improve their practice internally. Do no harm, I think, is what we're trying to say. And not just do no harm, but actually what is good for business is good business anyway. And if you flagrantly disregard this, if you actually destroy the environment, if you give kickbacks and bribes, we've seen huge companies collapse. And the greater transparency, and that's where I think the media plays a vital and important role, is exposing that. But having said that, multinationals are a very easy target. I get equally impatient with journalists who do an exposure, for example, of child labour in the garment sector in Bangladesh or Cambodia. And great, you've got your front cover, you've got your story, but actually what you've done is you've displaced those children. Great, you've got them out of the garments factories, but where have they gone? You haven't addressed their crippling poverty or their need for an income. They've gone into tanning and leather industry, they've gone into ceramics, which are far harder chemicals, far more hazardous, and in the worst instances they've gone into sex work. And you see that with booms and blips in HIV/AIDS infections among sort of 13, 14-year-olds, where they've been displaced from a semi-informal economy. So as a journalist, it's about responsible reportage. It's not about hitting your target, the Cokes and the BPs and the Nikes and Reeboks of the world. It's actually about embedding and making a difference and thinking responsibly, okay, who's going to pick up the pieces from that action? Our reportage has achieved this, but it needs to go a step further.